Hello viewers, it is a great pleasure to talk to you through this medium on this platform. The topic for our conversation today is the importance of research in developing content for syllabus based and enrichment lectures or programs. Before we get into this entire issue of importance of research for such program, let us first see why do we do research for in first place. If you ask this simple question, why do we do research for, certain answers may come up. The first being that we do research in order to understand a complex situation. That is the basic crux of a research process, that it helps you to understand and make sense of a complex process. And yes, as you all know, making a program is always a complex process. It involves so many factors, it involves audiences, it involves format, it involves the subject matter, and of course, at the end of it, it also aims at generating some effect. And to that extent, research is imperative, research is essential for any production, be it a fiction, be it non-fiction, because entire production process goes through a series of complexities. So, that is there, but besides that research is also required, particularly in the kind of setup that we work in. Research is also required to take decisions. As a producer, as a director, as a filmmaker, there are several options before us, and we want to ensure that whatever option that we choose is good, is appropriate, and if we use the typical term of our production thing, it is effective. So, to take decision, to make a choice between all the available options is a crucial point, and this is a constant dilemma, this is a constant question that hogs us. What decision to be taken at the level of maybe several levels, right from the selection of the artist, selection of the topic, the treatment, the format, all such decisions we have to take, and we do take constantly. But most of the time we take decisions based either on our intuition or on our experience, but most of the time we take decisions on the basis of the constraint or the limitations that we work in. And therefore, we generally do not pay much attention to research because we assume that these decisions are fine, and yes, our experience may help us to take good decisions, effective decisions, but this does not guarantee you that the decisions would always be good. And therefore, in order to take such decisions, it is always better and reliable means to do and to take such decision is to go and do a basic research. So, to take decision is the second purpose of the research. The third purpose, and again it is important for us, is having taken a decision, how do we justify those decisions. Many a times, and particularly the kind of setup that we work in, we are answerable to a series of people, a series of authorities. And whenever issues come up, why you have taken a decision, if we have done a research, then we can say and say with some degree of authenticity that the decision is good, this decision has been taken because this has been backed by a particular research. So, all in all, these are some very important areas of application of research, as I said, to understand complexity, to take a decision, that means to go for an option from the number of options that are available, and then having taken a decision, justify it, legitimize it. And final, an equally important area of research is to get more information from with respect to a subject, with respect to an area. Now, this is something which luckily as producer directors of this particular setup, we may not be compelled to do too much, because we have been supported here in this context by the subject experts. For example, the subject that we are working on, and we have to really take a lot of information from various sources, but of course we should be doing that, but luckily, as I said, we have subject experts who have been with the subject for years together, they have developed a considerable expertise in that, and therefore they can help us out in this way. So, though the information collection is an important aspect of doing research, as I said, we have some help here, some support here from the subject experts. So, these are 4 or 5 major areas where we need to do research for developing the content, here in this case making a program. But to begin with the understanding of complexity, remember the complexity of all the programs starts with the complexity of audiences. Finally, all this content is to be delivered to the audiences, because they are the one who are going to make sense of it all. And understanding audiences in any mass communication, or for that matter any communication, is not an easy task. People and scholars over years have really searched and searched, but haven't really found a very concrete solution to the exact way of understanding audiences. So, what actually the situation is that we have a number of ways to understand the audiences. But to talk about some very specific ways, I would say it is important for a producer to first understand who the audiences of my programs are, and that I think is a basic requirement. Unless we have a fair idea of who the audiences are, it is almost a futile exercise to get into the whole process of making a program. Now, when I say how do we understand audiences, there are a couple of areas which we need to focus on. Area number 1, where do the audiences locate? Where are these audiences located? Are they, going by the complexity and going by the diversity of the country, we need to find out where they are located. They are national audiences belonging to different region, different languages, and therefore we need to really find out what kind of language is suitable for them. Though we say that English, we may be producing program mostly in English or Hindi, remember, depending on the background of the program, the ability to understand English or Hindi and the kind of stylistic changes in the language would also be different for different kind of people. So, we need to understand who the audiences are in terms of their basic background. That is number 1. Number 2, we also need to understand that how do and why do they watch this kind of program, what is the mindset that they apply when they actually look at a television based program. Put simply, do they really look at television, do they really look at the programs from an educational point of view, or because of the several entertainment based program, do they approach television with basically an entertainment orientation? And I think, this is my hunch, but I think because of the kind of television environment that we live in, most of the people approach television from an entertainment point of view. Now, this is a given task to us, this is a given condition for us, and this is a tough condition, because not all educational program can be entertaining. But if this be found that yes, most of the people approach television or television based program with a little bit more entertainment orientation, then it becomes important for us to add that entertainment value to it. And let me tell you that adding entertainment value does not necessarily mean taking the seriousness or the content or compromising with the content of the program. So, we need to find out what is the approach of the student when they look at, or when they open, or when they put the television on to watch an education program. So, from the background, language background to the approach, there are several issues that we can look forward for to understand the audiences. The next aspect of audience research would be to find out whether they require a syllabus based or an enrichment, and if it is an enrichment, what kind of enrichment that they look at. Remember, when we are producing an enrichment program, we assume that they are already rich and we are adding something more to their understanding. So, we need to also understand that the product or the program that we are making is really adding on to the existing knowledge, and therefore, we need to assure that people have a basic understanding of the subject matter. Put simply, if you are going to have an program, an enrichment program on history, then we need to know that students know the basic facts of the history, be it national history, regional history, or an international or world history. So, we need to first find out, otherwise what happens is we assume couple of things from a student, and when those assumptions are not true, then the entire enrichment program becomes a little less effective. So, as I said, from various perspectives we need to look at the audiences, and if you refer to some of the issues in mass communication, we have several issues, we have several perspectives available to understand audiences, like the structural one where we understand who the audiences are, then the behavioral one where we understand why the audiences watch a particular program, and the cultural reception one where we understand how do they interpret the program, do they have the proper abilities, do they have proper comprehension abilities to understand or to interpret your program. So, either by concentrating on who the audiences are, or why do they watch the program, or how do they interpret the program, we can carry out several research. But please remember, I for one would think that one audience research is not going to be sufficient for one program. In fact, for making one program we need to fall back on several such audience researches carried out in the past, and for our very specific requirement we may actually carry one such research. So, this is about audience, and though I am talking about it in a very nutshell format, but let me remind you and let me tell you that the entire aspect of audience research is vast and huge. Having understood the audiences, then we shift to the next point, and the point being the content. Now, here when I say the content, we need to find out what is the basic theme that we are going to work on. Generally speaking, whenever we are making a program, we are being provided with a broad theme. For example, we are making a program on, say, communication. Now, generally the theme allotted to you is communication, but what in communication? Because communication is a huge area. Communication involves interpersonal, group, mass, even intrapersonal. So, what area in mass communication, what area in group communication that we are talking about? So, we need to do a research on that. Now, here the research does not necessarily mean that you have to carry a survey and you have to carry a focus group discussion or you have to do an in-depth interview. What you need to find out is you have to look at the syllabus. If you are making a syllabus program, then the task is a little simpler because you already have a syllabus in front of you. Syllabus has its own flow, syllabus has its own details, and therefore you may pick up an appropriate detail and can stick to that. But when you are making an enrichment program, you need to really see the association of that program or that association of that theme to the basic syllabus, and need to really focus on one small or one appropriate thing. Now, when I say appropriate, what do we mean by appropriate, and how to decide that appropriateness? These are the crucial questions which you need to work out on the basis of your interactions with student and perhaps even the interaction with the subject expert. Here again the subject expert would play an important role. Generally speaking, in the kind of rush or in the kind of limitations or the conditions that we work in, we stop at maybe one or two experts. But I would say that if it is possible, and generally we would try and make it possible, if it is possible, we should speak to more than one or two content expert, because as the subject becomes complex, remember the perspective to look at the subjects also change. Let us take the example of mass communication. I can for one tell you that the subject of mass communication can be taught from at least 2 or 3 different perspectives with respect to existing nature of syllabus that we have in different universities. For example, the subject of mass communication can be taught from the perspective of journalism. So, that is one way available. The same subject can be taught from the perspective of advertising and marketing, and the same subject can be taught from the perspective of say content maker. And therefore, we need to really work out and talk to several subject experts, or at least as many subject experts as possible, before we finally decide the focus of the subject. So, this is one area that you have been given a theme, you have been given a broad topic. Within that topic, how do I go about it? And the best way, as I said, is to have a group discussion, or let us say if I were to use the typical terminology of research, then you can have a focus group discussion of students, and I would also say that if you can have a focus group discussion of the content experts or the subject experts, that is also going to add a lot of value to it. Then the next topic, next point within the content research would be to find out the information content in that. Now, again if you have a syllabus based program, then the syllabus content would give you the scope and the depth of information. Again, when it comes to accessing information, people in our production line tend to call collection of information as research. Well, we may say so, but I for one would not really make it qualify as a research process, because please remember, collection of information does not necessarily mean that the information is being processed and information is being scrutinized. We will call it as a research only if we collect information systematically, number one. Number two, we scrutinize the information from experts, from established sources, and number three, or we organize that information. If the entire information collection process is passing through this scrutiny and rigor, then I would call it as a research. Otherwise, just simply collecting information does not necessarily make it call as a to be called as a research. So, the third step in content thing is the research, okay, the information based research. And the next, and perhaps quite important, is the format research. We assume many a times that people understand the formats, or what we call as genre, in the same way, but that is not. If you refer back to audience research, you would realize that people read formats in a different way. Now, what are the formats available for us? As you all know, and you are all producers and students of mass communication, we have several television formats available. For example, an interview is a format, a soap opera is a format, as a sitcom is a format, a documentary is a format, a docudrama is a format. But please remember, every format has its own areas of strength and limitations. We need to find out what strength we can exploit and the weaknesses within that format, how can we overcome those weaknesses. So, we need to find out that if it is a program, say on nanotechnology, what is the format I am going to work on, because the very subject is such that we have to confine ourselves to a particular format. I find it very difficult to imagine that a subject like nanotechnology can be transformed into a fiction or a dramatic format. It becomes difficult, not that it is impossible, but it is definitely difficult. So, my point is, when you deal with subjects like say communication, say history, say sociology, or say psychology, you can play with formats. For example, you can go for documentary, docudrama, and so on and so forth, and slowly bring out the point in the subject. But when you are confronted with topics, say in physics or higher technology, then we need to really work out on a format and try and make it simple. Now, this process again need overall orientation into reading the format. I will just give an example. There was a research carried out about how people, particularly housewife, read a format like soap opera, and a very interesting answer that came up, as one lady say, that I like soap operas because they are like our life. They are so regular and they are so yet indeterminate. Now, in fact, regularity and indeterminacy are the two characteristics of soap opera as a format, and therefore, please remember, format sips into your mindset and in a way help you to understand the thing, and therefore, format selection is a crucial decision, and for which I think we need to really fall back on the previous research, or if there is no research available, maybe we will talk to audiences, do some little bit of experimentation. The same program may be converted into 2-3 formats to begin with, and we can share this format maybe on a rough cut. You can have a rough cut of the program in 2-3 formats, show it to the group of audiences and take their responses, conduct a focus group discussion or have depth interviews with them, and maybe the decision of choosing a format maybe turn out to be useful and effective. So, the third point in research would be format research. And then the last point is, and which you are I think most comfortable with, and you have been doing it, is the actual production research, where you take decision related to the lighting condition, the set, the properties, the dialogues, and all the things which are related to actual production. I think with your experience and I think with your knowledge, and there are a lot of research that has been already carried out in production based research. So, I think here luckily we have more knowledge, or perhaps we have more expertise, but again this is one area where we need to also pay attention to research. So, audience, theme, that means the subject treatment, the format, and the actual production process research are the 4 areas of research. Now, I can talk about several methods, though this is not the actual time and perhaps not the occasion to go into the depth and the validity of the research methods. But generally speaking, because these are mostly qualitative decisions, I would say that emphasizing on qualitative research would bring about lot of insights. See, qualitative research has great advantage in one way, that qualitative research will give you a range of interpretation and ideas, and generally whenever research is required to aid a creative process which we all work for, then I think qualitative research has just a little edge over the quantitative research. For example, when you conduct a focus group discussion, the focus group discussion would reveal you the range of subjects, for example, the range of interpretation of a format or range of expectation from an educational program, and therefore we can incorporate different elements of that range into your program making. So, generally speaking, I mean this please take it with a little bit pinch of salt, but generally speaking I would consider that qualitative research method, particularly focus group discussion and depth interviews, would be of great aid. There is one more advantage for this, that we generally work in a very tight schedule, and in such tight schedules carrying out a survey on a large scale and a meaningful survey may not always be possible, may not always be feasible, and to that extent FGD may be relatively easy to do, and therefore I would strongly suggest an FGD, that is focus group discussion or depth interview, as a quick way, not necessarily the best way, but at least a quick way to go about such research. In the overall thing, see, I have not been talking about the rigor of research method, though this is an important issue, but I understand that we work in a certain condition, we work for a certain time period and a certain specific goal, and taking into consideration all these issues of time, money and resources, I think we need to adopt a pragmatic or a little more utility oriented approach to research method. Maybe somewhere down the line we perhaps may be compromising with the rigor of the research, but that for a while may be understandable because we have to deliver in a time, and to that extent I would consider that if we go for a pragmatic approach of research and emphasize more on qualitative dimensions of research, many of the issues that confront us, that create some problem for us when we are making a program, syllabus based or enrichment program for our channel or for our institution, I think many of these issues can be sorted out. There are several areas, there are several issues which still can be talked about, but going by the constraint of these entire conversation, dialogue and time limitation, I think I will stop here, but not before welcoming the queries that you have. Thank you so much.